And we're going live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first live edition of Darf Talks. I'm your host, Darf Mike, and I'm here on the Nerd Street channel to bring you an interview with the lovely, the wonderful, the much appreciated Michael, agM Abood. How's it going, man?
Thank you for having me. I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm pretty good. I'm better now. Ready to get some talking on. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us here. You are a pioneer. You're the first person to be crazy enough to do this live with me.
That's what they called me in high school. Like
Pioneer?
the pioneer Abood.
Did they actually?
No.
Oh God, I would want to know the story behind that nickname. The Pioneer Abood. Well, so for those of you who don't know him, this is Michael agM Abood. He is currently the coach of the Squirtle Squad, the newly named Squirtle Squad, although it's not a new name, but I'll touch on that later. It's going to be an MDL team competing in the Mountain Dew League, consisting of T. Connors, Stellar, DJ, Phantom, and Loner. Phantom and Loner, of course, being new additions to the team. So let me start you off by asking, what is the story behind the name behind the Squirtle Squad? Because in my research, I found out that you played on a team called the Squirtle Squad in like season 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's just always been like my go-to like troll kind of fun team name, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I always thought like even as a kid like the Squirrel Squad was just like hilarious. Like they all wear the cool little sunglasses and stuff.
Oh
And
yeah,
whenever we needed like a team name and no one really cared about it, it was always like the Squirrel Squad was always the go-to.
that's a classic old Pokemon the animated series. That's
For sure.
oh yeah, that's where we all get our roots, right? It's a touchstone of culture. So last season with Squirtle Squad, you were not the Squirtle Squad. You were Iceberg to start the season,
Mhm.
and now you were brought in right before the season started, right?
Yeah, Tom joined like a week before I did, and
Mhm.
then Tom beat D Connors, and then I ended up joining a week or two later.
Okay. So what was sort of the what was the impetus to you being brought in? I know you had worked with Tom with T Connors in Beacon the previous season. You had coached that squad. You guys saw a lot of success. You weren't a squad that many people pegged early on as playoff contenders, and you made it to playoffs. Knocked out in first round, but still, made it to playoffs. What was the process that led to you being brought in as a coach?
I mean, me and Tom both didn't expect Beacon to die the way it did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously we made playoffs, we did it right for our first season together, and the way it ended up, it just people were not happy at the end of the season. Ryan got approached by the now Swell Patrol, but they had the Echo Fox sponsor lined up. So that was kind of a big deal, especially for the MDL scene.
Mm-hmm.
So at first Ryan didn't want to take it. I pressured him to like trying out with them and playing. And Gramps didn't really want to rebuild all the way. So he wanted to bring Mainline back, and Mainline was not happy with me and Tom because we replaced Mainline right before the playoffs started. So he
Mm.
wasn't happy about that when he got back in the team. So he ended up cutting me and Tom. And I mean, as a coach, it's really frustrating to go from team to team every season because I mean, nothing ever gets built, right? You're just
Mm-hmm.
rebuilding it every single time. And so I was looking for a team with Tom basically, just so I could at least have one player that's used to it, used to me. And
Okay.
when Tom's trying out with Iceberg, me and Tom both tried out for a couple different teams.
Okay, so it was kind of a package deal to begin with. Tom was
Yeah,
brought in, and then he wanted you to be brought in as well. And they didn't have an existing coach, right? Like you were,
no,
so you were filling a slot that was in many ways they needed to fill anyway.
yeah.
Okay, and so early on, just you were brought in right before the season started, but early on there were a lot of struggles. You guys went 0-4 to start the MDL season. Now there were some heavy losses. There were some stacked teams. Actually, a lot of the who's who of the eventual playoffs. I think it was Swole, Subtle, and United, and then Atmosphere as well. And I think did Subtle make playoffs? The other three did.
No, Settle didn't.
Okay, the other three made playoffs. And so what was going on here? What was the mentality sort of in that 0-4 run?
To be honest, we had a lot of success in scrims, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people were calling us scrimmers. We played a couple qualifiers. We got upset by a couple different teams, and I think that mentality really got to us. And we didn't really have a lot of structure. Hades was calling back then, and we had Crux on the roster, and we were missing a lot of like structured team play. So we decided as a team to find an IGL, find a like more structured in-game leader, because Hades was just doing it because nobody else wanted to do. And Crux was having like really bad internet issues and stuff. Like he was just teleporting around. So he was like the candidate to go. And then we tried out. I brought DJ in, right? Nobody really knew DJ, so I brought him to try out, and everybody liked him.
Okay, so DJ was doing the calling in the season.
Yeah, we
Okay.
picked up DJ to IGO.
Okay. And so
And we still lost. Like we only went 0-2 with Crux,
okay.
right? We lost E United and Atmosphere with DJ still, but that was like right when he joined.
Okay. So you needed the leadership, and then was there also just an issue of sort of meshing once you have that leadership?
Yeah, for sure. Like DJ was pretty. DJ's a pretty like easygoing caller, right? Like if you're confident with something, he'll make it happen for you. He'll try his best to do what you wanted to do.
Hmm. Okay. Sort of build on the strengths of the team as opposed to enforcing his own style.
Hmm.
Okay. And I mean, so that's definitely something to consider is that time taken to mesh to bring the leadership in. But to some degree, was it also just the caliber of opponents? I mean, it's hard to say at the beginning of the season, but that wound up really being the top tier of
Yeah, I
MPL.
mean, that was a lot of people talked about that. Like, I know we always made tweets like, "Oh, 11 wins in a row," that's pretty sick. But at the end of the day, we played, we just beat all the teams that we should beat, right?
Hmm.
And especially in CS:GO and MDL, like that's still good, right? Every season you lose to teams that you shouldn't lose to, but we ended up just winning all the important matches.
Okay, so in that change, in that sort of swing from match 4 to match 5, I mean, the match 5 was, I think, the Hentai Weeaboo Master Lords,
Yeah,
elite of the elite.
yeah.
But beyond that, I mean, you started rolling some teams, some very well built teams, some very accomplished teams. I mean, yet maybe they should have been teams you were beating, but they were still impressive wins nonetheless. So what happens in that mentality change? I mean, what is the atmosphere in a team when you go from 0-4 to all of a sudden win after win after win?
It's not an overnight change. We all joked about us all quitting the team if we lost to the Hentai Weeaboo Masters, and
Mm.
I think we played Azia right after that. So if we didn't win both of those games, I don't even know if we would still be a team right now. But I'm just happy we ended up doing it. I mean, at the end of the day, we just took one match at a time, right? We never really like looked forward too much, like we just got more confident with the first two wins, I think, and it just carried us through the season.
Hmm. Is that so? After those first two wins, that build of confidence, were you before that? Were you sort of in a pit? I mean, obviously there were issues that
Mhm.
you guys were trying to fix, like a systemic issue of the leadership, of the structure of the team, of figuring that out. But was there sort of a confidence pit that you had to overcome as well?
For sure, like I was talking about earlier, like a lot of people called us scrimmers, and I think it got into a lot of people's heads.
Hmm.
A big part of that was Blackout, right? Blackout beat us in a qualifier like 16-6 or something. We started CT side train, but our CT sides were really bad when I first joined this team, and they still kind of are bad. But we got destroyed by them, and they talked a lot of crap about us, and they ended up they ended up blacklisting us in scrims and stuff because they thought we were scrimmers. So I think like the biggest like turnaround in the season was when we 16-5 blackout on
Hmm.
Inferno.
Hmm.
Then it kind of everybody got out of their own slump, and
A little bit of the
it,
revenge game,
mm,
feel good
and they
moment.
they unblacklisted us afterwards and asked for scrims.
That's got to be a nice little bit of Schadenfreude. Nice little bit of the revenge feeling.
Mm-hmm. Made it definitely. Everybody was definitely happy. That was probably like the happiest win that everybody had throughout the season.
So at
It's
that kind of a turning point, do you feel like is there a palpable change in the team chemistry, like the way you guys are playing and playing with each other at
for
that kind of
sure.
moment?
Like it definitely made everybody like a little more happier in practice and in matches. It definitely gave people like more of a kind of like a reason to keep playing. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the time, CS teams when you're in a rut, like you just come on because you have four other people relying on you. Like you just come on because you don't want to let everybody down. You just play the game just to play the game.
Hmm.
And I think after like those wins, it definitely turned around for us.
What sort of as the coach when your team's sort of in that its state of people are coming on just to play the game because they're committed to it, they're in that sort of rut of not really knowing why they're going through it, why they're playing, what they're trying to accomplish. What do you find as a coach that you need to do to sort of push beyond that, or to motivate players?
You just have to try to lighten the mood, like try to get people into it, try to get players that aren't like necessarily like talk a lot into it more,
Hmm.
make jokes and stuff like that, just so people have learned to actually have fun again and actually want to win again.
So whatever you were doing in that turn obviously worked out. You guys wound up going 11 rounds in a row, or 11 games in a row. Finally dropped one to Torqued, I think, but really went on a tear there and made playoffs. And now you had made playoffs the previous season with Beacon, and you said you really didn't expect that team to die, and were not terribly happy with that result. But making playoffs with Beacon was it's sort of an expectation going into this season that you expected to make playoffs, or was it still just something to achieve first?
When me and Tom joined, I think they went 9-7 or 8-8 with Raz instead of T counters. So
Hmm.
like I knew this roster could definitely make playoffs, and I knew like obviously I think T counters is a lot better than Raz, so it's an upgrade. They're one win away from playoffs, so yeah, I would have been really disappointed if we didn't make playoffs this season or last season.
So okay, so you were going into this expecting to make playoffs. What or was there sort of also a mentality regarding that like first round exit? Like with Beacon, you made it there and then immediately got knocked out. Was that sort of a hill to overcome? Was that like
I think
March?
so. I think it separates like 8 teams make it into MDO playoffs,
Mm.
and do how like schedules are, it's pretty easy to be a decent team and get into like the seventh and eighth slot, sixth and eighth slot, around there. So I do think winning the first thing is actually a big milestone and definitely, like what you said, a big hill to overcome. I mean, on Beacon we did lose to Soar, who ended up winning the whole thing, but still that didn't doesn't make it feel better.
That's definitely true. And it on with Iceberg Notberg, whatever you guys were at the end of the season, the melted iceberg. You took the 2-1 your first round playoff victory over Atmosphere, a team that had beaten you earlier in the season. Was that kind of a victory moment too? A little bit of added icing on the cake.
For sure. During the regular season, we were up. We played Mirage. We started CT side. We were up like 12-3 at half, I think, or 11-4 at half, and we ended up losing due to a T side. And Mirage was one map that we didn't really go over too much with DJ because DJ joined like a couple days before,
Hmm.
so T sides were a little weak. During playoffs, we knew we could beat them, even though they were definitely better at the end of the season with the pickup of Janji. It really came down to what maps, and we ended up losing our pick. And I figured that Bibby, who was Atmosphere's coach, was going to try to pick a map that we didn't play that much, right? So, because how throughout the season it's BO1, so you vetoed down to one map.
Hmm.
So in playoffs it's ban pick pick. So we didn't play any nuke or any cobble during the season. So you can't, like, you're expected to have to play one basically in playoffs. So the day before our playoff match, I did a whole thing about nuke, and we went over nuke, and we ended up beating them on nuke, and I think it surprised them a lot.
Hmm. So you were sort of stratting. Were you as part of that? I mean, you were building your own strat book for Nuke. Were you also looking at theirs?
No, because they didn't really play nuke too much either. Like
Hmm.
our permanent ban going forward was definitely going to be Cobble because nobody really liked playing Cobble, and I think to play Cobble you need a really good drop player, and if you don't have a player that wants to play drop, you shouldn't really be playing Cobble. So we didn't really have a drop player, so we knew that we had to at least go over nuke just in case a team like Atmosphere decided to pick it against us.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. Um, so getting that playoff dub, obviously a big hill to cross over to get into that upper echelon to actually prove that once you've made it through the crowd, if you will, you can also beat someone else who made it through the crowd, knock them down. And after that, you ran up against E United. Now, E United have been sort of heavy favorites in the Mountain Dew League for a couple of seasons now, a few seasons now. What's it like knowing that you're going to go up against that kind of a heavy hitter, that kind of a that? What's the underdog mentality there?
I mean, you just don't really think about how you should be the one losing. Like you never go into a match be like, oh, we're supposed to lose this match. Like, we played United quite a bit. We played them in Sevo a couple of times. We played them earlier in the season, ESEA,
Mm.
and we scrimmed them against a lot of, and we're usually pretty good against them. Like usually all our matches are pretty close. It's just they they're really good at destroying SCT sides.
Hmm.
T sides are usually pretty good against them, but they definitely destroy SCT sides. And we tried to talk about it going forward, but it's a lot harder.
Yeah. What is that mentality like immediately after you take the loss? After you know that your season's over, what is it bittersweet in that you've come that far and you've managed to achieve that much, or is it just in the moment crushing?
I think a lot of people didn't expect us to make playoffs and didn't expect us to actually be atmosphere going forward. So everybody was definitely happy about that. I
Hmm.
mean, after we lost to United, we still had the third place decider with Torqued, so we weren't really worried about anything but that at that time.
And that third place decider obviously didn't go
Yeah,
to
it didn't go
plan
our
either.
way. No.
No. But is that still? Do you sort of look back after the immediate like pain of taking the loss, of taking the playoff exit? Do you look back and you see what has been accomplished that season and sort of look back and see what you've built? And is that sort of
I think everybody going forward was trying to figure out how we could not lose again. It wasn't
mhm,
really more of like what we accomplished because it's definitely like a slower process. Like the ESA season's 3 months long and like 2.5 or whatever. So like when it's happening, you kind of have time to like realize that kind of stuff, and then
mhm.
by the end of the season, you're just trying to make it so you're not in the same position as again as last season, trying to win.
Okay, so immediately just into the what went wrong, how do we fix it,
Yeah.
how do we change it? So another thing to touch on, we've sort of gone through the length of your season. The other storyline that was happening simultaneous to this season was the chaos with your org that no longer is an org with Iceberg.
Hmm.
Now this, for anyone who's watching who's not familiar with it, the Iceberg organization paid you guys for what, a month? Signed
That we were
contracts for a month?
contracted for, I think, 2 or 3 months. They were everybody else on the team was contracted longer than I was contracted.
Mm-hmm.
They signed their contracts mid-December. I didn't sign mine until like really late January. They ended up getting paid for half of December and half of January, and that was it.
Mm. And then the org just sort of stopped paying. Told you they were dropping the team. It came out they didn't
Mhm.
have any money to pay anyone,
Yeah.
and they
What they were
exploded.
telling us was that they had investors lined up and that they're really close to signing the deal, and they're just waiting on the money. And they were paying us out of their own pocket and stuff for those 2 months. And like so a lot of people thought like we should have went out earlier or with everything, but they paid for December and they paid for half of January, so we didn't have reason not to, like believe them or at least give them a chance to actually come forward
Mm-hmm.
with this stuff. We had a couple meetings with them, like asking them what's going on, and they said like it's only gonna be a little bit longer. And then eventually we had a meeting where they said the investor backed out, and if they didn't find another investor within the weekend, that Iceberg was done. And then we had another meeting like a week later, and they said that they're just trying to find an investor and all this stuff. And then a week after that, they told us that we were dropped.
Mm.
But via our contract, they can't just drop us. They have to give us months in advance, which made them owe us even more money.
Mm. So, sort of an ironic note here is that the whole pitch with Iceberg, with their org, their bio, all their marketing was that they were going to set a new standard in player treatment.
Yeah.
Would you how do you feel about that standard that they set?
I mean, you gotta set goals for yourself, right?
Would you say they set a new low in player treatment?
I mean, I guess at least we got paid a little bit. They
Mm.
definitely could have handled the whole situation better. Like right after they told us that we weren't getting any money, we we were instantly banned from the Discord, blocked from Twitter, and stuff like that. And it's just overall not being nice. Like we understand you can't pay us and stuff, but at least own up to it from the beginning. Like they tweeted out some bullshit that like we harassed them or threatened them or something, and we never did anything. I think Hades posted in Discord saying like, "Oh, anybody else not getting paid, just message us because we're gonna like release a bunch of stuff." And yeah, that was all.
Hmm. This is kind of a thing that's all too common at this level of Counter Strike, right? The MDL, the semi pro to pro turn. Sort of
Mm.
these orgs that bloom up overnight around somebody who's talking a lot, blowing a lot of hot air, and doesn't necessarily have the substance to back it up. Did you, going into this, I mean, you said they were talking about having an investor close. When you were first signing your contracts, did you kind of have a bit of a feeling?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I told them this was like really crappy. We got paid in Canadian dollars. Like I knew this was not gonna be like a good experience for anybody going forward. I mean, a lot of people were saying like, how dumb could you be to sign that contract? How dumb could you be to keep going and stuff like that? But like, just because like I don't know, just because we weren't the smartest people about it doesn't mean we deserve to be like scummed over, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we signed a contract and you paid us for like the first month, you should pay us for the rest of the contract. I don't know. A lot of backlash came out about us from like MDL teams and some pro players and stuff like that.
And was it? I mean, was it in this kind of a situation, in this sort of level? Is it a question of did you take the iceberg, or did the players, because they signed before you were involved, did they take the iceberg opportunity over another opportunity, or was it just sort of like this is what was available?
I don't think they looked because they trialed under Iceberg the season
Mm-hmm.
before. Like there's still Iceberg, but that was like the trial season for them to get funding and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't contracted, I don't believe, and they ended up signing their contracts before last season in like December. So I don't think they ever looked for a different org or
Okay.
anything like that.
So it wasn't a question of competition. It was just like this was the expectation. Was previous season was the
Yeah.
trial, and then you go into the contracts.
Hmm.
Okay. So, okay. How does that sort of process, being tangled up in the business side of things, being tangled up in that kind of a chaos and that kind of a struggle, how does that impact you as a player, as a coach? Does that make just everything else more difficult?
It definitely does because players at this level are expected to go pro, right? Or not expecting, but trying their hardest to make pro, which means maybe they're ignoring some of the real life stuff, like maybe they don't have a full-time job
Mm-hmm.
or they're still living at home and stuff like that. So when you sign something, like every little bit of money counts. So when you're not getting paid, that's when you got a lot of pressure on you from other stuff too. So it definitely made everything a little bit harder for everybody.
Does that, again, sort of touching back on like the role of the coach, is it something that as a coach you try and, I don't know, get people out of their heads, get people out of thinking about that? Is that a distraction that you have to actively confront and sort of combat in keeping people focused on the game?
I think so. Like coaching isn't just like a Counter-Strike thing. You want to make sure everybody's happy or everybody's can actually bring their best to practice every day. So I mean, there's not much I could really do about that kind of stuff. I tried, I talked to the org a bunch and tried finding other orgs and stuff like that. But like at the end of the day, if they're not paying us, I can't pay the players. So.
Yeah, yeah, that's not something you can completely fix. It's just something to mitigate, I suppose. Um, so that sort of covers the questions I had about Iceberg in particular, about the magic of the iceberg that wasn't.
Yeah, we ended up getting lawyers to try and do something. Like we never expected anything out of it,
Mm,
but we just wanted to do it anyway. And so they basically just said that Iceberg doesn't exist anymore, so there's nothing they could really do.
mm-hmm.
And I still followed the owner on Twitter, and after a lawyers contacted him, he ended up blocking me. But he's like running for like national chair of finance and stuff in
Is he
Canada.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty funny.
Wow, that's a bold move. Switch from a failed org to trying to run for the finance chair. That's clearly a great resume for
Mhm.
the position.
And then we weren't the only team that they screwed over. Like they had a Dota team with that the Ali 2K guy. He won
Mm-hmm.
like a major for EG, and they weren't getting paid either. And their salary was higher than ours, so they owed the Dota team a lot more.
Okay, so moving on from the business side of things, the rather unhappy tale of the season, I suppose. We'll look back on sort of more of the CS side of things. Something that was very much successful, was had a lot of positives. What, looking back on the season as a whole, on your time in the season, your time, what you did, what you brought to the team, what happened, what would you, apart from the ending, apart from not making play the LAN, what would you change? Is there anything looking back that you would change about the way you approached the season, or the decisions your team made?
I don't think so. Like every team has the problems, even when you go on that 11 game win streak, there's still problems. You know, it's a little bit harder to address problems with people when you're constantly winning. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so there's not. I don't think so. I think it would have been this. We would all do the same thing
And so, are there lessons from the season that your team is going to take forward, that the team in general are taking forward?
for sure. Like a big thing for us was practicing a little more.
Hmm.
Like people were a little more too serious in practice, I think, and it definitely like the attitude in our team environment in practice was not really fun for everybody, and it was definitely harder for us to practice certain things and have like actual productive talks and criticism and stuff like that.
You touched on this a couple times in terms of like making sure that the team mood is happy and that there's fun being had and things like that. How important is it to be having fun while you're playing in a team, while you're playing in a game?
I think if you're like coming on every night, you do need to like the people you play with to a certain extent, right?
Hmm.
A team that always likes each other and is friends outside of the game is always going to be better than people that are just coming on to play and never talking again. And especially like Ruin brought us some good points on Twitter. Like pro teams play a lot more than lower tier teams. They don't practice against us. So the bro teams have the advantage like constantly, right? So
Hmm.
it's always a grind uphill, and it's always easy to do that with people you like. Then just like you can't treat it like a job at this kind of level.
Hmm. It has to be a passion as opposed to an obligation.
Yeah,
So, and then, okay, so personally, you as a coach, you're relatively new to coaching, right? Couple seasons.
yeah. I've only done 2 seasons. The one season with Beacon and then the last season with Iceberg.
So this latest season with Iceberg, what personal lessons are you taking away as a coach?
I definitely have to be a little bit more outspoken during practices and uh like during practices I don't like to do too much
Hmm.
because like during the game just because it's I don't want to tell people like I don't want to be micromanaging people in the scrim, right? In practice.
Hmm.
Like I like to take notes and then talk about it afterwards or talk about it when they're dead and stuff like that, just because it lets them learn and see why it didn't work and stuff like that. Because if you just tell somebody what to do, they don't really understand like why you're telling them to do that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I definitely have to do that a little bit more going into it because our CT sides were pretty crap last season. So I'm just trying to make it so it's not like that again this season.
Gotcha. So a little more hands-on, a little more focused as opposed to that sort
Mm,
of background approach of observing and then making changes, but a little bit more of a direct approach to sort of molding the direction
yeah,
of the team. Okay.
for sure.
So going out of the season into the off season, you guys made some changes. Now there were, just to recap again for anyone watching who's not familiar, Alter and Hades left the team, or were removed from the team, and you guys brought in Phantom and Loner. Now, first of all, what was the reasoning behind the subtractions? Was that a player decision, or was that the team's decision, or?
We knew like Alter was having problems in that team being able to do what he wanted to do and to do it well.
Hmm.
Like he's a player that definitely would beat himself over, like beat himself up over stuff like that, like him not playing well or losses. He likes to think that like a loss is like a lot on him
Hmm.
when it's not. So it's harder for him to see like the bigger picture or what he could do better to help the team. So we needed a player that didn't didn't really do that, was more team oriented and more wasn't like blaming himself for everything. And with Hades, like Hades is a good player. He just is kind of too passive with the op. He doesn't really know how to win rounds, right? If you're down numbers, he doesn't really know what he needs to do to win that round. So
Hmm.
that was a big problem. We never had like a big op presence early and mid round. So that was definitely something we were looking for when we were looking at operas.
So would you say that for Alter it was a mentality type of thing, and for Hades it was more of an in-game what you wanted to be doing in the game type of situation?
Yeah.
So both just sort of removed for various pieces of just what the team overall was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so you brought in Phantom and Loner. Now Phantom was playing with Ira last season, and Loner was playing with
Jack 6.
Jack 6. I had a mental lapse. Thank you. With Check Six, and now both were players playing very well on teams that had a lot of challenges in and of themselves. I mean, Ira came up from Maine last season, and they were beset with roster swaps constantly, people moving, people switching teams, twiggying. Um, and so, what did you see in these players that made you want to bring them into the team?
Um, when we were looking for players, we knew that it was going to be kind of easy to bring anybody into our system just because of how Hades and Altars Worlds worked out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were just looking for people, one that we got along with, that had a good mindset, and that had wanted to do the same thing. So we tried out a bunch of players. It was a little hard because we didn't get to try out everybody we wanted to try out because Tom was on vacation for like 2 or 3 weeks. So we had to hurry up and pick people up. I think we tried out like 10 people over the course of like 2 weeks. So it was kind of crazy. But Loner was by far the best individually skilled operator. Like the stuff he does is pretty insane. Uh, he's a really good individual skilled player. He's a little quiet, which is something we need to work on. And Phantom is just like, I just like call him the turret. Like he's really good at playing those spots where you just need somebody to get a kill to, and he delivers a lot with that kind of stuff.
Sort of an anchor type player.
Yeah.
And so that process of looking for of the tryouts of the bringing somebody in, do you like are you personally familiar with either of these players? Have you played with either of them before?
No.
Had anyone on the
The first
squad?
time. I don't believe so.
Okay. So do you when you're looking at these players and I mean you have the tryout, right? You have them play some scrims with the team, maybe a qualifier, you get a sense for them in the server. Do you also go and talk to their previous teammates, coaches, that kind of thing?
I did, yeah. I talked to people just to, because when you try out for a team, obviously you're putting on your best face,
Mhm.
right? You're not showing your negatives. You're not showing maybe how you just are day to day kind of stuff. So I think it is important talking to teammates. You don't have to take them like 100% like, oh, that's how that guy's gonna be with this like environment. But
Mhm.
you do have to take what they say a little bit.
So, okay. So you made the decision to bring them in. How do you said you anticipate them being a pretty easy transition just because of the roles you're bringing them in to fill. Um, what is your expectation? Do you think the team's going to shift the way they've been playing at all to accommodate these players? Or do you think it's very much a sort of plug and play into what you were trying to do previously?
Um, I think it's definitely plug and play, especially with the roles. Like Hades wasn't like a very big support opera, right? So he pretty much had his freedom to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like the opera role in general, it's either you're helping the team or you're kind of doing your own kind of thing. And so bringing in a new opera like that isn't that big of a deal. Bringing in Phantom is going to be a little bit different for both people. I think we have to definitely meet in the middle there because he's going to be transitioning into more of like a aggressive like entry fragger kind of thing.
Are you going to be using him as your main entry?
Yeah,
Is that something he's done before, or something he's sort of
he's,
attacked on?
he's he's comfortable with doing it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he entered for error or not, but he's pretty comfortable with doing it, and it's been going well so far.
Okay. And that's sort of something where the rest of the team also needs to adapt to his style of entrying and setting him up.
Mm.
And it's sort of a timing. I mean, entrying is so much crucial to timing, utility usage, that kind of a thing. Is that something that you're finding comes easily, or has it been coming easily with this new uh, iteration?
Um, yeah, I mean, yes and no. Right? It's gonna be different depending on what he's used to, what we're used to, and maps like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's just stuff we talk about and fix like one step at a time, basically.
So again, as a coach, what's your, I guess, your responsibility? What kind of actions do you take to sort of onboard the new additions, to get them integrated, to get them in the mentality, to get the team working together as a unit?
You just have to make sure that they're one comfortable with the spots they're playing, the stuff they do and executes and setups and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure they're actually happy and what they expect from the team and what they expect from me.
Do you, as a coach, work with players one on one, or just always as the unit, or how does that work
It
in terms
it
of?
definitely depends. Like if somebody's struggling in a spot, then yeah, but it's mostly of like a team kind of thing because every day like people are going to miss shots and or be like really good that day, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So it's definitely a more team based thing unless we're struggling at a certain thing.
Okay. And so that responsibility for getting the team organized, how much would you say that that is the coach's responsibility, the team in general's responsibility, a shared responsibility, an IGL's responsibility? Where does the bulk of the burden of sort of figuring out the chemistry of a new team fall?
It's a little bit on everybody. I think like it's good. It's good to have coaches and IGLs work together really well. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, you need to be on the same board. You need to have the same plans. You need to agree with each other, or at least come to an understanding with everybody. So those two are probably the biggest, coming up with like setups and strategies and stuff at least. And then for everybody else, it's more like everybody should be watching demos at this level, right? Everybody should be doing their individual homework if they're struggling a spot and stuff like that. Like I don't think it's up to the coach's job how to like teach everybody, not teach, but like tell people how to play every single round. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's definitely something that they need to figure out on their own as well.
Okay. So looking forward to next season. Now we've talked about the additions. We talked about who you're bringing in. We're talking about the expectations for them. My chair's squeaking. It happens. Um, but looking forward to next season. What's the goal? What have you set as the goal? What is in your mind the finish line, the pillar to cross? Maybe not the finish line, but the most important hurdle.
I mean, I think like it's not a move up season, obviously. So during move up seasons, it's a little bit harder to get practice or like serious practice and stuff like that. But I think we're all expecting to make playoffs, especially if we do two roster moves like that and we finished fourth last season. It'd
Mm-hmm.
be like we all think that our roster is better now than it was before. So finishing other like if we don't make playoffs, it's gonna be a big disappointment for everybody.
Is there a change? I mean, you talked about sort of the quality of practice in a move up season versus non move up season, and is there a difference in motivation in a non move up season? Is it still very much just trying to prove it, or is it? I mean, in a move up season, you have that dream, right, of making pro, of hitting that mark, of making the transition to fully salary, to hitting all of the opportunities that are associated with pro. Without that objective, there, what's the mentality like?
Yeah, it definitely hits some players more than others, just because like they don't really see down the road, you know? Like this season is for us to get better
Mm-hmm.
as a team, right? It's to give us an advantage for next season where it actually is a move up season. So if we're not taking this serious season 100% seriously when we could get an advantage from this season, then it's just like a waste of time to play, you know? So
Absolutely.
for some players, it's definitely a little bit harder to stay focused and keep the motivation for something that's going to be like 5 months from now.
And is that something you just need to communicate with them to explain why it is so important to be putting in 100% of the effort now?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a talk we've had a couple times as well.
Okay. And so goals and expectations. You're making playoffs. You're expecting to make top four. What do you anticipate being sort of the toughest challenge? I mean, the motivation we've touched on. Keeping that focus, building that new team chemistry with the roster. But based on what happened last season, what you see going forward, what is the biggest challenge that you anticipate? What sort of how does that inform the way you're thinking about the season?
It's just everybody, you know, we got to keep our motivation up, me included, and just got to keep practicing and stay positive. Because we're obviously with a new team, switching out two players,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not that hard to integrate them, is still a little bit different. Especially like I don't know, it's gonna be up and down. Obviously, we've only been playing for 2 weeks so far, and the next season, like we have match on Tuesday, so we haven't been practicing for that long and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not a super consistent squad right now.
Would you say that there's a specific difference to your approach going into this next season from what you did last season? I mean, last season, obviously, you were a very late minute addition. You sort of came in right before the start of the season. This time, you've had a season to build with the team to learn. You've made some changes, both that you wanted, that the team wanted, and so you're going into this much more, presumably, with a game plan, right? And how does that change your approach going in?
For sure. Like when I was picked up last season, I started basically matches started, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like I learned about the team's problems as the season went on during matches and stuff like that. So it was definitely a lot harder to just instantly fix stuff like it will be this season, just because like we're keeping three of the same players. I know what the strengths and weaknesses are. I know what we they need to improve on. I know what I need to improve on. So it's definitely a lot easier this season than it was last season.
So okay, so that sort of encapsulates nicely. We did, the season recap analysis of the season. We did a little bit of looking forward to next season, to how you expect to approach it. I want to get a little more abstract. I want to get a little more a little less focused, a little more theoretical. You as a coach, your mentality as a coach. So you've been doing this for 2 seasons now. What was your experience like working with coaches previously? Had you ever been in a roster with a full coach?
No. Um, when I played, coaches weren't really like not every team had a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really 100% believes in a coach. So it was definitely new for me going into it. I didn't really know what to expect, especially when you coach. You definitely do have to do different things for every team. You're kind of expected to do different stuff for different teams, and it's kind of hard to find your spot, especially if you've joined a new team every season.
How did you prepare for that transition? How did you make that transition? What did you personally do to sort of figure out how the coaching role should work?
You just have to talk to your players. You just have to ask them what I could do for them to be happier slash like easier going and what they kind of expect from me. So that's like another thing. Like it's kind of different from team to team. Beacon was a little weird just because they didn't really know what they wanted from me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of just like a six eye kind of.
Okay. And so and trying to formulate this next question in my brain. So having that sort of feeling out process to you being very new to a coach, never having really worked with a coach before, were there resources you leaned on? I mean, I know you've played previously with, say, Ruin. You're friends with Ruin. Did you consult people you knew who had been working in that coaching role, sort of ask them how you should be approaching it? Or
Yeah, for sure. I talked a lot with Ruin. Me and Ruin are really, really good friends. We lived together for a little bit too, so we've always talked to each other. And before I started coaching, I asked him if it was something he thought I would be good at, or if it's something I would like. And we talked about it with like pretty in great detail for a while. And we came to the conclusion that it was something that I wanted to do. And a lot of the stuff I do was because I talked to him. And I'm also really good friends with Osa Random. We used to play against each other back in the day in the very beginning of CS:GO, and he was just always somebody that we kept in contact with. So when I have like specific questions and stuff, I usually go to those two people.
and so what prompted you to make the decision to swap to coaching? What was the sort of the moment where you were like, okay, here's the next move in CS?
When I came back, I quit in 2016 for Overwatch,
Mm-hmm.
and I played competitive Overwatch for like the first 6 or 7 months of it being out.
Mm-hmm.
And then my team ended up falling apart, and I came back to CS and just played with friends, like with Sasquatch and Planks and Four Shot and them. And I kind of started playing it again and liking it again. And then I joined like a random IM team, I think, with Planks, and that's like that whole the Gorilla Gang and Coach Jay and them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got an offer to go back to Overwatch and play on a really good team full of like ex-pro players, and I ended up doing it, and then we ended up dying again, so it wasn't worth it at all. Like I definitely regret quitting Counter Strike the second time. I don't regret quitting it for the first time. The second time, because it's definitely every time it's definitely a lot harder to come back and a
Mm-hmm.
lot harder to relearn Counter Strike. No one wanted to give me a tryout. Like no MDL teams would even try me out when I first came back.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step for me was just coaching, I guess.
Hmm. Okay. Sort of that mechanical change, a little bit of a
Mm.
tough hurdle to come over. So use the knowledge. What was the transition to Overwatch like? Because Overwatch is something that I've been personally learning a lot more about. Just there's a lot going on with the Overwatch League and with whatnot. But CS is, I don't know. It's the beautiful game, right? And
Yeah, I mean CS. There's no game like CS, right? I feel like being a CS player didn't help me in Overwatch at all, really. Like all there's a bunch of other competitive games that are more like Overwatch than Counter Strike is,
mhm.
and that's why you saw people like AZK and Swag like struggle in Overwatch compared to other people. The Counter Strike just doesn't help you with the mechanics of Overwatch.
So getting it back more a little bit to to touching on more of the coaching role. with the coaching role, I mean, a lot of it's about being that sixth eye, about pointing out things, about pointing out transitions, doing the analytical work. But there's also a leadership role, right? And to what degree is the leadership of the team really the responsibility of the coach?
I've always thought like the IGL should definitely be more of a leadership role, just because you definitely need people to respect you in game way more
Mm-hmm.
than like as a coach. It's good to have people's like respect for practices and stuff like that, and they need to respect you as a player and at least the knowledge of Counter Strike, right? Or you're kind of being a pointless job. But for like a team leader, I think it's more important for an IGL.
So how does that relationship between the IGL and the coach work? I mean, obviously it's presumably a little bit more of a crucial relationship than any other player to coach relationship. How does that interaction work for you?
It works really well for this team
Mm-hmm.
because I've known DJ for like 8 or 9 years, and I started playing Counter Strike 1.6 with him. So like we've been friends for a while, so it's really easy to talk to each other, and we both respect each other's opinions. And even when we disagree with stuff, we do find a decent common ground for both of us, so we're both happy.
Mm-hmm. So in AGM's ideal world, in your vision of the perfect way this team would work or any team would work, what would be sort of the crystallization of the coach's role?
Um,
Maybe that's a little too abstract. How
no,
would if you could have your way, what would be the bread and butter of what you do?
mm, it'd definitely be. I think coaches there's like some MDO teams tried to get me to call in the coach role, and I don't like that. But I think mid round changes or mid round micromanaging is good for coaches, especially on CT side and even on T side. Like a big thing for coaches is definitely keeping track of how many pauses you have and pausing and just everybody taking breathers and just talking over why what they're doing is working or why we're not doing stuff that would work against that and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think coaches should ever really call, like be an in-game leader. Like I know like pro teams coaches don't call just because of how the tournament rules work, right? Coaches can't talk during not pauses in tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
So but still MDO teams want coaches to call and stuff. I think CT side is where the coach could shine a lot more. I guess it depends on the team, but there's a lot more micromanaging on CT side than T side, I believe.
Okay. So what would you say about your personality? I mean, you said when you were making the decision to swap to coaching, you spoke to Osu, you spoke to Ruin. Um, what sort of about you as a player, about you as a person, about your mentality, made you think and made others think that you would be suited to the coaching role?
I was always good at taking criticism when I was trying to be like a good player and stuff like that. And I learned with some people like I think D Mode. I don't know if you know who D Mode is. A lot of people nowadays won't really know who he is, but he played 1.6 invite towards the end,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a really smart dude with Counter Strike. I learned most of the stuff I know now from him, like as like a team environment wise. And he actually ended up coaching Liquid for a while, I think maybe for like half a year or something. But then he went to the police academy, and that was like his dream job. So he quit Counter Strike stuff. He quit coaching for Liquid to go to the academy.
He quit running CT sides to do actual counterterrorism.
Yeah,
I suppose that's in a weird way that seems like a logical transition, right?
yeah.
He had a lot of theoretical training going there. Okay. Um. So now speaking about tactics, like just your mentality for the way the game should be played, for the way in-game tactics should work. When you're planning for a team, when you're making your own game plan, are you more focused on being active in putting your own game plan into play, into prepping your team to do certain strats to accomplish certain things, or are you more focused on being reactive, on preparing for whatever the other team is doing, or for adapting to what they're doing on the fly?
Definitely like our game, right? Like you need something consistent to fall back on when other stuff doesn't work. And a lot of teams will like that's why a lot of teams get destroyed and stuff. Like if they come in with a game plan and it's just not working, they don't really have anything to fall back on. And I think having a consistent way of approaching stuff, regardless of who you're playing, is definitely needed.
Okay. And do you? So obviously it sort of changes depending on the context, right? Like I assume playoffs is very different from regular
Mhm.
game seasons. But how much prep work do you do for an individual opponent?
I will. We will go over like whatever map we find. Like we'll figure out what maps it's going to be. This season's going to be a lot easier than last season, just because you find out the map 2 days before the match. Before
Mm.
you find out the map like an hour before the match. But I'll just watch demos, just like get what they actually do, and just like match prep, document it all, and just send it to people. And then we'll talk about what they do, why they do it, and if we want to do something to counter what they're doing.
So last point on the sort of metaphysical of the coach. What would you, if there was anyone watching this or watching this at any point who's looking to make that transition to being a coach or thinking about getting into a coaching kind of a role, what advice would you give them in terms of preparing them to take on that responsibility?
You just have to constantly communicate with your team and your players and just like, what they want and what you want. You have to make sure that it's kind of a common goal, and what they want is something you have no problem doing or can do without like any unnecessary like fuss and stuff like that.
Okay,
And
nice
plus,
one.
you have to make sure they could take criticism and stuff like that, because if they can't, there's really no point of you being there.
Okay, it's a nice little parting message about coaching. I want to, before we go away, because we're starting to butt up against our time limit here. It's starting to get towards the time you need to go scrim and do that coaching thing that we've been talking about so much. I want to talk a little bit about AGM, the person and the player. So first of all, what's the story behind the name? What's the story behind AGM?
It's my initials backwards. My name is Michael Abood, and my middle name is Gene.
That
So
works.
it's just AGM backwards.
That's a good explanation. That is a nice, succinct reason. So how long have you been playing? I mean, you said you've been playing since 1.6.
Yeah,
When did you
I
actually
started
start?
playing competitive Counter-Strike in late 2010, I think. So I mean, I was definitely like an 1.6 player, like my friends from high school got me into it, and I
Hmm.
didn't really start playing competitive until like 2010-ish,
Okay, so
which is like the dead side of 1.6. So
Dead Side of 1.6, Birth of Go and Source and all that madness. What would you say? I mean, how long have you been playing CS in any shape or form? When did you discover the game? Do you remember?
probably like 2009.
Okay, so 10 years almost of playing the game.
Mhm.
What's kept you playing CS? What about CS has just kept its hooks in you for all this time?
It's just constantly different. Like every round is different. Every time you play, it's completely different. It's what you make of it, and you could see your time being put in to actually matter and improve yourself. And I don't think any other game has like a competitive scene where you can take control of a round. Like you watch like Overwatch, you can't single-handedly kill a whole team. You
Hmm.
like it's the same thing like League of Legends and Dota. Like you can make sick plays that make your team win, but it doesn't feel as satisfying as completely just winning around in Counter Strike with like an ace or something.
So when was that? What was your first LAN? What was your first in-person competition in Counter Strike?
The first Philadelphia.
First Fragadelphia. Okay, Fragadelphia OG. Speaking of which, new Fragadelphia, Frag 12 coming up soon. It's beginning of August, right?
Yeah, I believe so. It's like August 3rd, I think.
You headed out to that?
We're going to try. I mean, we don't have a sponsor, so we're going to be playing the online tournaments, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay. And if not, you gonna figure out a mix?
Probably, yeah.
Gotta see you in
I mean, it's,
Philly.
it's it's pointless not to go. It's so close to me. It's fun. You get to see people.
You gonna make it out to the Nerd Street DC showcase?
I'm going to try.
Yeah, the 10K.
Mm.
That's the other big one. That's end of August. Um, let's see. Do I have any wrap up questions here? I don't know. It was just kind of interesting. I was in doing research for this. I came across a VOD of you playing in 2014. I spoke about it with you earlier, but this was a game. You were on Justice Pro. You were playing against Exaltus in 2014. It was the first match of Civo Pro, and it was you in the server. There was Shazam in the server. There was XP3. I think Planks was in the server as well. It was on your team.
Yeah. I think it was
Moses,
Planks, Flowsick, JMZ, and
Flowsick was there.
Shazam.
Mm-hmm. And then
And I think that was like the Warden, XP3, Moses Storm, and Desi roster. So it was definitely different times back then.
it was an interesting little time capsule. For me, I'm someone who's relatively new to the scene. I don't have the storied history. I haven't been playing for that long. I haven't been part of the scene for that long. So it was interesting for me to see lots of people who I know in other contexts, sort of in that time capsule of headed back in time. So on that historical note, I think we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been really a really interesting conversation, really fascinating conversation. It's been nice to be able to pick your brain. And again, thank you so much for sitting down with me for the first Darf Talks live.
I feel honored. It's the first one.
Inaugural. You get to put your stamp on this series. So hopefully it's an illustrious series so that stamp means something. We don't peter out after 3 episodes.
I believe.
We're counting on everyone's support who's watching this right now. So once again, round of applause. Wish you best of luck this season with the Squirtle Squad. Hopefully you guys pick up an org that lasts a little while this time. Hopefully full season at least.
Pays us.
Yeah, that pays you. Well, that's sort of what I meant by lasts. That actually pays you.
Yeah.
That fulfills their obligations and their promises. I know you guys certainly have the team play to back it up. Certainly have the cred to back it up. So, if any orgs are watching this as well, these are guys to check out. I'm expecting good things from you guys. I'm expecting a lot and a lot of accomplishments. I'm very eager to watch the progress of the Squirtle Squad this season. See if you guys can evolve into Blastoise by the end of it.
We won't let you down.
So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I think that's going to be it from us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to everyone who's been watching this. We will be starting this as hopefully a weekly series in this time slot, 8:00 p.m. Thursday nights. So check us out next week when we'll be back with somebody else.